la la la.
Alright, okay. Hello everyone! Welcome to the first episode of the Lay It Out podcast. How are you, Alice?
I'm good. How are you, Kerry?
I'm good. Actually, no, do you know what? There is something I wanted to talk about. So, the Co-Fresh thing. I checked.
Tell me, what are the updates?
The packaging. So it was in the intro. I was saying that they were either called like tubes or baskets or something. They were actually called chili and lemon grills.
Grills.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah,
are they like the same shape as waffles?
Yeah, but with holes in them.
And what flavour were they again? Chili and lemon. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So we'd love to try some of them.
Co-Fresh, sponsor us. Hello.
Yeah. So I was at this really interesting event yesterday. I feel like I'm going to tell you guys about it because it has a toilet-related punchline, which I think... Anyway, I was at an innovation forum for the microbiome.
Okay, what's that?
So it's like basically it was all these speakers talking about how the microbiome, which is what I'm interested in, is being harnessed in industry and like used to make services and like personalised nutrition based on your microbiome, all this type of thing. And at the end, the speakers were asked, what do they think is going to happen in the next 20 years? Or in 20 years' time, where are we going to be with like microbiome-based industries? And one of them came out with that they think there's going to be a toilet that you're going to be able to use. So you poo into the toilet.
Okay.
And then it shoots out a little information card about like your health.
From where?
From your poo.
No, wait, no, hang on. No, where's the information card coming from?
Like a little printer that's attached to the side.
Interesting. Yeah. That could be quite good, actually.
Yeah, because and they could tell you what to eat because basically they think how you process nutrients is really based on your microbiota that are in your gut.
Because I feel like a lot of people do look at their poo out of curiosity and see what they did and what they produced that day. But also, just to see that it's healthy.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
You definitely do that.
When I was at work in your office not long ago, I was in the toilet cubicle next to someone doing a wee, and then the person next to me opened the door before they flushed. Is that not really weird?
I mean, I wouldn't do it.
I think it's weird. It's really weird. Why would you do that?
Maybe you're in a rush.
Okay, it doesn't change the amount of time it takes you to get out of the toilet.
Yeah, I suppose.
Anyway, so we have 2 people here with us today. Our first guests of the podcast who are now allowed to speak.
Hi!
Oh my goodness, I was having a really hard time, guys. When you were talking about looking at your poo.
I was trying to tell Dan about the poo group,
Oh yeah.
but he didn't read it.
We have a WhatsApp group.
No, will you say we? I'm not in it.
I'm in it, but I've never contributed. But it's basically a bunch of boys sending each other pictures of their poo.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
And it's always the unhealthiest poos as well.
That's not good. That's not what someone should do.
That's not what you want to see.
I've never done that with my friends.
At any time
I
of day.
don't think normal people do it.
No.
There's always one. For a community to develop
Yeah.
around this thing is kind of crazy.
Yeah. So, I've known Natalie since we were year 2?
Year 4.
Year 4. So we've known each
Like
other
7?
since we were 7.
Cute.
Yeah. So we go way back. We had all our emo times together.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. And Dan over here works with Natalie.
Well,
Used to.
it's a complicated matter.
Yes.
Oh god, are we not going into it?
We
We can
had a
do.
violent fight and battled with swords and shit. And it all went crazy.
Oh shit.
That's not what happened.
Like Kingdom Come Deliverance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But now we share a podcast.
It's called the Danalysis podcast.
Nice.
It's a fantasy football podcast, so it's slightly different to the subject matter today, but just kind of a sort of fun thing.
Sports science is a thing. Do you know what? I'm sure there is quite a lot of research that goes into the psychological and whatever of fantasy football.
Yeah,
Oh,
I would
there's loads
love
of
to hear a podcast like
Like
that.
Alan Shearer did that documentary about head injuries.
Yeah.
And
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, they're
there's
really
loads of
interesting.
stuff.
I've been meaning to watch that.
But that's funny because when it was advertised on Match of the Day, you'd be like, what the fuck is this shit? Why is this here? Why have they put this segment here? Why is Alan Shearer talking?
I do not remember. No, maybe that was my reaction to Shearer. It was probably more, why is Alan Shearer doing this, rather than me not thinking the subject was cool.
Was good.
But, yeah.
I see.
So yeah, what we wanted to know is, what is your guys' relationship with science? Do you like it? Did you like it at school? Were you good at it?
Are you intimidated by it?
I was good at the maths bits.
Mm-hmm.
So biology was...
chemistry.
Yeah, biology was
Physics.
my worst, but physics was my best the whole time. And then chemistry, as soon as you started having to add things, you know, all those things, I don't even know what they were.
Like chemicals?
Yeah. When you had to add
Yeah.
those, then I was good at that. But yeah, biology was my worst. But I still got 3 A's at GCSE.
Very well done.
Thank you.
Nicely done. All my teachers thought I was really good at science, but if I'm honest, I didn't really understand anything that was happening when I was at school.
Okay.
In any subjects or in science?
Particularly in science. It was kind of the class that I'd fall asleep in and be like, I'm too tired for this. But after I left school, I kind of developed a much larger interest in it because I think
that happens a lot though.
Yeah. It's something when you're in school, you're like, why do I want to know why it's breezy at the seaside? Like, why is that something that's interesting to me? What does that matter?
Yeah.
But I think as you grow older, you sort of start to develop an interest in just how everything works literally around you.
Also, I think the way it's taught in schools, it just doesn't apply to anything in your life at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very boring. They didn't give you a reason or a topic that's really going to grab you. And I guess that's kind of the problem with school. You're trying to teach 30 kids in a class. You can't really tailor it to people's individual sort of interests.
Yeah. So do you guys do anything to do with science now with your current jobs at all?
No.
Not, I wouldn't say particularly, no.
What do you do?
You first.
I work for a record label and I just look at Excel spreadsheets a lot with music metadata. It's quite dull, really. But you just say that I work in a record label bit and it sounds good.
It does sound really
That
cool.
does sound good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It sounds better than I'm a researcher.
So I run a YouTube karaoke channel.
Okay.
Essentially, like when you go to a karaoke night, you sing at the pub or whatever, or at the bar. It's basically that, but just on YouTube instead. So,
nice.
So lyrics on screen sort of videos.
Didn't you guys hit a crazy amount of subscribers recently?
Oh, yeah, just 4 million.
Nice.
That was last week, yeah.
Oh shit.
And Kieran was like, oh, did you see this when he said to me, like, oh, it doesn't even feel like you left that long ago. And I was like, I left 2 million subscribers ago.
Yeah.
That's how long ago I left the channel.
Oh, damn. Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, it's going really well in that sense. But, karaoke's just good fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm just really thinking of science now. I'm thinking, how does that link to science? I really want to answer that question.
I don't know. Karaoke? Science?
There must be something scientific to it.
I guess there'd be like psychology.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you're producing the videos, there'd be a psychology aspect there and what would appeal to people.
Actually, that has always
watch your
been
videos.
something that's really interesting because, like, when we began the channel and it was slowly growing and slowly picking up like a head of steam, I was wondering, like, why is it that we're getting more subscribers or more views than other channels? I never looked at what we were doing as particularly, like, amazing or individualistic.
Yeah.
And then I was kind of thinking about the psychology of it and why do people get so sort of engaged with our channel. I remember actually in one of my first few months in the job, there was an article about the effects of singing on mental health and how it makes you feel makes you physically feel good, even if you're terrible at singing.
I thought you were going to say in my first few weeks in the job I was really depressed. That was like my last year in the job.
That's just now. But no, it is something that I kind of, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So I guess we should get into it. But one thing I did want to ask, actually, so basically we're now going to talk to you about 2 science papers. They're both, Alice is very recent, mine is within the past few months.
Does it matter how relevant they are?
Yes. So basically the field of research moves so fast that it...
In one way, not so in others.
So a paper that was out 2 years ago might be considered old.
Right. Just because people have done studies since.
Yeah, exactly.
Or people have found new things.
Exactly. Like there'll be many groups around the world basically trying to do the same thing at the same time.
Kind of like in a race.
Yeah. So actually, what I wanted to ask was, what do you guys understand of what a research... If someone said to you, I've got this paper, would you get what they were talking about?
I assume...
Yeah.
This is a research paper.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I assume, and this is just kind of guessing, that it's going to be a lot of studies or a lot of tests on a particular sort of narrow subject to try and prove or disprove an initial theory.
So what you've described is what we would call a journal.
Okay.
So then when it comes to... Because I assume you're taking that from when you're talking about a newspaper, it's the whole thing, right?
I hadn't thought about it. Probably, yeah.
You're doing good, though.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. So that would be a journal.
Yeah.
Whereas when we say papers, we literally mean it is one study.
Right.
Or it
Okay,
A
so
single-
a journal is made up of lots of
was...
papers.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Like articles,
Yeah.
nearly.
Okay, so basically my paper is I'm going to be talking to you about these neurons that were made from people with bipolar disorder, and then they were basically able to predict whether patients are responding to lithium.
Responding to lithium.
Yeah.
Like, if lithium talks to them.
Nirvana have a song called
They're
Lithium.
called lithium, yeah.
They play
And also
Lithium.
Evanescence. Yeah.
Of
Oh,
course.
there you are.
yeah.
How could we forget?
That'd be good though, wouldn't it?
Back in the emo
If
days.
the lithium was like, cheer up.
Stop being a bum, bro. You've got a whole life ahead of you.
Okay, so lithium is one of the most it's fairly widely prescribed for both depression and bipolar disorder.
Okay.
The problem with a lot of antidepressants right now is that some people respond really well to them and some people don't at all. So there's this big problem of, I'm sure you can imagine, people are being put on this medication, it doesn't work, and so then they have to go through this lengthy process to try and find an antidepressant that does work for them. So this paper actually kind of addresses that. So basically it deals with things called induced pluripotent stem cells.
Sorry, what?
Right, sorry. Can you tell me what this study is again, please? Can you
Okay.
just read the heading?
Do you want me to really read you the title?
Yeah, maybe.
Neurons derived from patients with bipolar disorder divide into intrinsically different subpopulations of neurons,
Right.
predicting the patient's responsiveness to lithium.
Okay.
So basically something you might realise quite early on is that scientists are quite bad at writing.
That's what, like, doctors have bad handwriting. So it's not. It's just that they're writing it well, just no one can read it.
Well,
Yeah.
I think it's not understandable to the average Joe, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you
No.
read that out to a normal person, they're going to be like, that's too many words.
Yeah.
When you could just say, does lithium, or can I tell if lithium is going
Yeah.
to...
But the problem
affect
is,
people
so the reason that would be great, but
Yeah.
the problem is for us is when you're trying to, basically you need people to read your articles. You want as many people to read your articles and then reference them in their work. And if people can't tell from the title exactly what your study's about,
They're not
going to read it.
So what's a neuron?
Basically, neurons are the cells that send messages to each other.
Okay.
Yeah. So whatever, there are neurons all down your nerves in your brain.
They're linked to
And-
synapses.
Yes, yeah, they're linked at synapses. And through the synapses is how these neurons basically communicate with each other.
Okay. Because
Um,
this is fucked if you have MS, right? That's what the problem is.
So the ones that are affected in MS are your motor neurons, so
Right.
anything involved with movement. So what these people are doing is basically this technique called induced pluripotent stem cells. I will explain to you because you two looking at me like
Can you say that second word?
pluripotent.
Pluripotent.
Yeah.
Like,
So
it's
basically-
not just potent.
Many potencies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
that is actually it. So a pluripotent stem cell is a stem cell that can turn into or differentiate into any cell of your body.
Okay.
So with induced
Stay on.
pluripotent stem cells, so we will call them iPSCs from now on. With iPSCs, they will take any cell from your, usually skin or hair, they will use. In this paper, they use your B lymphocyte, which is a white blood cell. They will take one of your cells, they will basically revert it back into its pluripotency stage. So this is a cell that will be there when you're developing, just before you're an embryo. That development is those cells. So this cell can now, they use these things called Yamanaka factors.
What a name.
It's not real. Someone has made that up to have a joke with you. That's not
Sounds
a
like
real
an
thing.
anime.
Yeah! Like, you're in Yakuza and it's like, I've got to go and eat Yamanaka Nara.
My favourite comic.
Yeah, so they apply these Yamanaka factors, which are basically these 4 components that will divert this functional cell back into its pluripotent stage.
I'll
Say
be honest,
again, but
I have
slowly.
no idea what's going on. Like,
So we're doing our
what's
jobs
this
well.
got- Like, what's this got to do with... Okay, so
Okay, so
you have the cell.
yeah,
And so the point of the study
Yeah.
is to make it so we're finding out if lithium
Mhm.
helps you not be depressed
Mhm.
if you have bipolar.
no, it's seeing whether we can predict if these patients will respond to lithium.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Whether it's negatively or positively, it doesn't matter.
At
Whether-
all.
Right.
Yeah, so whether it will help them. The reason why we need to talk about these iPSCs is because they use these iPSCs from patients with bipolar disorder
Okay.
who are responding and not responding to lithium, and then they can turn them back into these stem cells, and then using whatever they need to make it grow into a certain type of cell, they will take these stem cells that they've made and program them into neurons.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So this bit is just like, how do we replicate the cell that we need
Exactly,
to find out
exactly. And then the great thing with iPSCs is because they take it from these patients that already have this disorder, it sort of takes on the persona of that person in a cell mode.
So this is kind of like, like it's just a more complex version of like, okay, well, I need like a skin graft, and we'll take these cells from here, and then we'll put it here, or no?
Not quite.
Like you're taking a cell and making it do something else.
It's like saying,
but similar.
It's like saying, I need a skin graft, so I'm going to take some cells from my liver, and I'm going to turn them into skin cells and put them on my face.
Okay, okay.
So basically, they can create these neurons from these people that are responding to lithium and not responding to lithium.
And see what's going on.
Exactly. That was pretty much the first experiment they did. They first want to see, can we make these neurons from their lymphocytes?
Right.
Which they could. It was all great.
Sick. Great work.
So then what they do next is a technique called patch clamping. So
that sounds painful.
Scientists aren't good at the branding side.
Well, hey, we have a factor called Sonic Hedgehog.
You know, I did hear about this.
Yeah.
That's pretty good branding.
I saw this going around. It might have actually been on a podcast related to games. That was probably where it came from.
It's like a private joke within science.
Right, yeah.
Everyone loves Sonic Hedgehog.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so basically what they do is they patch clamp these cells. So what patch clamping does is, so basically our neurons, they have electrical activity, and that's how they communicate with each other, right? So with patch clamping, you can kind of put 2 little voltmeters on one cell, and then you can record the electrical activity of that cell.
I understand what you've just said.
Okay.
Completely.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to understand the actual little clamp
what
things.
A patch clamp.
Yeah, like
is.
you know, no, but you know in physics, and you're making like an electric circuit, and you have those little crocodile clips.
Yeah, that's what
Is it like
thinking.
that? Is it crocodile clips on a cell? Because then I'm on board. I've got this. Because I'm imagining like an egg and crocodile clips on the end of a really small egg.
Mm-hmm.
That's some pretty primary school stuff to be going on in like super science labs.
Yeah.
But if that is the case, damn.
Okay, so it's kind of like that, except it's more obviously it's a cell, so everything's done under a microscope because we can't see our cells.
It's really tiny.
And they use, it's called a recording pipette. So it's this sharp tip that they sort of
stab into
the cell, and then from that they can record what's going on.
Okay.
Obviously, it's a lot more complicated than that. I don't do patch clamp, and it is quite.
What kind of scientist are you?
The worst kind.
But yeah, that's basically how it works. So at the moment they do it a lot with, say, mouse brain cells, or
when they're still in the mouse, or they've been removed
when they've been removed from the mouse.
Indeed.
So they'll patch clamp these cells, and then they can record the electrical activity. So basically what they found was that these people with bipolar disorder, compared to people from healthy people, that these cells were hyper excitable. So basically the tiniest bit of stimulus
Stimulant. Stimulus.
basically they are very responsive to any sort of input.
Singular.
Yeah.
Their electrical activity is triggered off a lot easier than a normal healthy neuron should do, for example. And then basically they look at the waves that the patch clamping produces, and they found that there were big differences between the responders and the non-responders to lithium.
Okay.
Right.
All of and these are all people with bipolar disorder.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But some just responded and some didn't.
Yes, exactly.
And that's why we're here.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, one of the things that they found was that the spontaneous firing rate, so the rate at which this cell randomly just gives off electrical activity, was a lot higher in the lithium responders than the non-responders. And there were lots of other things within that electrical current that they were measuring that were very different between the two cells. And at this point, they were like, oh shit, they're different enough that maybe we have something here. Yes?
Am I right in thinking the electrical activity is messages?
Yeah.
So that's like how they communicate?
Yeah.
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 Cool. Just wanted to clarify that for myself.
Can you just
Slide
say
them in the DM.
Can you just say the last thing you said again, please?
The electrical current between the responders and the non-responders were different enough that they could say, there's something going on here.
Okay. With what?
So this is where the issue is potentially.
Exactly. Not really
So
an
you've
issue,
given them-
maybe a good thing.
You've given them the lithium now, or no?
These are people that are on lithium treatment or not on it.
Okay.
So naturally,
Yeah.
these people might have different types of neurons,
Right.
and that's why some of them respond to the lithium and some of them don't.
Right, and we need to find out why it is.
Well, why was a great question, but that's actually we don't know. We don't know why some people
Right.
respond to antidepressants and some don't.
But you're trying to find out how.
Exactly. So basically, this paper was sort of the first one to find out that actually these two are very, very different from each other: the lithium responders and the non-responders.
Okay.
So then, what they thought from that was, using this, can we then go on to predict whether someone will respond to lithium or not?
Right.
Which I'm sure is clicking that there are many advantages to being able to find that out in the first place.
Yeah.
So what they did was they would do machine learning. So they put into a computer program, lithium responders show this and this and this and this, and the non-responders show this and this and this and this. And they will do this on on many cells. And then the machine then knows, okay, well, these people show like this and these people like this, so if I see this, it means this.
Too many
Okay.
this.
Yeah,
So-
yeah. So the computer program knows that if I see,
A certain trait in a person.
like, thing 1,
Neuron.
thing 2, and thing 3, then
Yeah.
I know that that person is going to
Respond.
to it.
Exactly.
So you're telling the machine which
Like the
types
results.
of...
Do you know what it's like? If we had Doritos and Pringles, right? And we tell this machine, Doritos are triangular, they're a bit more knobbly, they crunch a bit more, blah, blah, blah.
They're kind of powdery.
They're powdery.
Yeah.
Right.
And then we say the Doritos, they
No,
are...
the Pringles.
The Pringles are this shape, they curve like this, they're in this sort of packaging, blah, blah,
Right.
blah. And then now we can present it randomly, Doritos and Pringles, and the machine will be like, that's a fucking
Yeah.
Dorito.
Just in the input stage, like when you're asking the... basically feeding the computer the information, do you already know what types of... the neurons, like, say some person comes into the doctor's office, they have bipolar, they want to maybe try lithium. Do you have to do a test to figure out what, like, how their neurons would respond, or how convoluted is that?
So, that is kind of what these people are claiming that maybe you can do.
Right.
So you just take, like, a swab there
Kind
in the
of. The
doctor's.
only problem is that...
Give me your neurons.
Wait, before we get on to that, so let me just finish it off because we're near the end of the paper anyway. So they would then randomly put in non-responders and responders blinded, so they don't know what these people are when they put these neurons into this test. And basically, if they tested 5 cells from one person, there was an 85 to 100% accuracy that this machine learning could figure out what they were.
That's good.
Which is very good. So that's kind of, they're saying, on the electrical activity of these neurons of these patients alone, we can figure out if they're going to respond to lithium. So that's a very big claim for us. Going back to what you were saying, producing these iPSCs is very, very expensive. I'm not sure how expensive, but very, very, like thousands. Also, just to get them to a point of electrical activity, it would take about 50 days.
Right.
It's a pretty long time.
Yeah.
It's far too long and far too expensive to then say in the clinics this is something feasible that could genuinely happen.
But in the future, it'd be quicker and less expensive.
Yeah. Maybe.
Hypothetically.
Hopefully. That's the hope.
Do you have any final questions or comments that are eating away at you?
No.
tell the science guys they need to crack on, figure out how to make this economical.
We're trying.
This podcast, this is the mission of the podcast now.
Why did they pick people with bipolar to do this with?
It's just going to be a disease that they're interested in.
But you could have picked, like, any kind
There's
of...
people that are depressed that respond to some medication and some don't. There are people that have schizophrenia that respond and some don't. It's just this is the disease that they're studying.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you say there's some people that respond and some people that don't. Is that based on... Do they have any idea what that might be based on? Is it genetics or is it...
I'm not completely sure, to be honest.
Okay. They just know it's the case and that they could harness
But
it.
maybe Silent Demelza will do some reading and put it in the
No,
blog
she
post
does
for
not look
us.
like she wants to.
So they would want to figure out what's going on. But I think the fact is they haven't made a big mention towards that. They do say that, I quote, can predict response of a new patient to lithium on electrophysiology alone. So that to me sounds like they're saying, we can use this in the clinics, which we can't. It's at the moment it is impossible unless, I don't know, Donald Trump dies and we give all his inheritance to the clinicians.
I mean, worse things could happen.
Try it. but we have kind of said it on the podcast now, so they're gonna know it's us.
True.
We killed him, man.
No, we're sending
It's a
hitman.
conspiracy.
We can't give this all away.
How good are the CIA at finding people?
Quite good. You just have to encrypt stuff and stuff. I've been listening to a podcast
have-
on Silk Road, and it's all fascinating.
Silk Road is interesting, actually.
Yeah,
What is
There's
Silk
a
Road?
Silk Road book.
it's a man who basically set up like a site to sell drugs. Essentially, that's not
Well, it's on the deep web, isn't
yeah,
it?
on the deep web to sell
Dark
drugs.
web.
Dark web, sorry. Deep web is the documentary.
It's buried in the internet.
In the web.
In the-
In the interwebs.
Yeah,
In the bad people's internet.
Yes.
but like he was,
Along with Bitcoin.
exactly, yeah, and
but
the
thing
whole
is-
point was he used Bitcoin. Everyone used Bitcoin, so
Wasn't
no
there
one
a
could be
big
traced.
argument about how actually what he's doing is quite good? Like in terms of as
Was
far as drug dealing goes, his was really safe.
Yeah, but then he
and-
started killing people, and they started trading arms and
See, this
other
isn't-
things.
This isn't, and I would
He's-
highly recommend watching Deep Web, the documentary, because it actually, there was a lot of doubt over whether the guy they've actually incarcerated was the guy behind Silk Road.
Right.
He was,
Interesting.
there was kind of an alias called Dread Pirate
Right,
Roberts, and he was apparently many different guys.
Yeah, but that's the point, is that it wasn't. It was just the one man. And he changed his name from Administrator to Dread Pirate Roberts so that people would think it had been passed down. It's really long. The case file, the podcast are doing a 3-part series on it at the moment. That's quite good. It's quite in depth and it's a bit heavy at times. It's just about coding and drugs. But it is interesting and it's well written.
Nice.
Deep Web is sick.
So we just had the neuroscience segment. So I'm a nutritionist, just to give you a bit of background. That's also a scientist.
Are you sure?
Allegedly.
Well, not all people who claim themselves to
Oh,
be
yeah,
nutritionists are scientists.
Good point. Good point.
So
So
you are.
nutritionist, this really grinds my gears.
Okay, I'm here for it. Come on.
Wait, hang on. I've seen a food plan given to someone that they were like, you need to cut out sugar, so eat sweet potatoes rather than white potatoes.
God,
and
no.
the person claimed to be a nutritionist, and they did the whole like, oh, hot and cold, acidic and alkaline. Blah, blah, blah.
No, stop. You're burning my ears. So,
So there are some people who con you and tell you what to eat. And then
Basically,
then there are
So-
nutritionists.
here's the annoying thing about the term nutritionist. It's not a protected title. So you can do like a 4-year degree and like loads of exams, a little like industry placement. You can really know your stuff and you'll be called a nutritionist. You can do a 3-hour online course and get a diploma that will call you a
That's
nutritionist.
true.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Can you create an Instagram account, put in your bio that you're a nutritionist, and be a nutritionist?
Yeah.
Because that's
Yes.
where I thought this was going.
Yes, Dan. Yes, in fact, you can.
There
do
are
that?
many
I'm gonna
Instagram
do it.
nutritionists about. Many.
Many.
Many also nutritionist personal trainers.
Yeah.
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 There's also nutritional therapists who.
What?
Yeah.
Therapize
They talk to your foods. It's okay,
Yeah,
you're gonna
yeah.
go down really well today.
And so that's what they do. They kind of nurture your food and then they feed you the food that's happier.
And sometimes you have sad food.
and then the
sad.
food that's happier. It's all about balance. So if you eat happy food.
That's why Happy Meals are so good. Right?
Exactly. Natalie.
McDonald's is the
Meals.
pinnacle of nutrition.
Happy Meals cure everything.
It's so true. I'm sorry. Nutritionist, I'm sorry, but I fucking love McDonald's.
Lawrence,
And
Heb-
nutritionists aren't mad at you.
I love
Some would be.
It's
I also
fine.
love McDonald's.
Lawrence Hebert told me that he was getting depresso because he was having too much McDonald's and he'd stopped eating McDonald's and then he wasn't depresso anymore.
I mean,
you
Depresso?
look like you've been crying.
I was laughing, and then it gave me tears. When I laugh too hard, Natalie, it all
gets
comes
to
out.
you.
It gets to me. I get emotional.
Sorry, they all just silent cheers then, Chin. And it was the weirdest
Oh
thing.
my goodness! I wish this was a video podcast.
You know what? It was supposed to be.
Yeah, we
but I'm
decided
so
to wait.
glad that it's not.
We've decided to wait till we're a bit more experienced to then
Oh.
bring in the video aspect.
You made the right
That's
choice.
fine.
You
Yeah.
made the
Don't
right
worry
choice.
about it.
Anyway,
Oh my goodness!
So where was I?
Sorry for derailing this.
It's okay.
You're just explaining that you're a nutritionist, a real one.
A real one, yeah. So yeah, that's basically it. So you just beware of people calling themselves nutritionists.
Beware of hippies.
Check their
Credentials.
credentials. Do not check their Instagrams.
Oh, okay.
Check their credentials.
You're not seeing if they're hot or not. You just want them to tell
But
you.
maybe if they are, they'll be better nutritionists. I don't know.
If they're
If they have 10k followers,
Sorry,
Natalie.
To be fair, no, this is... if someone has a bang and bod and they claim they're a nutritionist, I'm more likely to believe them than a fat guy telling me they're a nutritionist.
Hey man, this is why Instagram's a problem. And they're all coming to get us. Like,
What the fuck?
They're slowly taking
fat
over the
people,
world.
The hot people.
Oh,
The hot
See you.
Instagram nutritionists. They're actually the world's biggest threat right now.
Completely unrelated to science, but
Fuck
like,
ISIS, it's all about those nutritionists.
it's not unique to nutritionists. It's the idea of people saying there's something on Instagram, but because they're hot, they have like hundreds of thousands of
It's
followers.
instantly validated
And it's
because
like-
they're attractive.
Instagram models.
This
it's
is
a
how
thing.
I know, and it's crazy. People
you-
get
Can I
around
just
being
clarify?
hot.
There are some Instagram nutritionists that do have legit credentials. No. What's the word?
Shade.
No shade to any of you. That's not a very Irish term, so I feel weird saying it. No shade
What would be
to.
a really Irish term?
I don't know.
No shade to all you wagons out there pretending to be nutritionists.
No, because the white, she doesn't want to throw shade on people who aren't wagons. She wants to throw shade on the wagons.
Yes, Natalie.
I just-
Natalie knows what I'm
I
saying.
just really wanted to use an Irish word.
There must be other words.
We have a lot of food-related words.
Like what?
Nutrition.
Potato.
I think that's racist.
Is that your word?
Racist against my own race.
I
Don't
think
think
the
you
Irish
can
can
talk
take
about
claim to
potatoes.
potato.
You reckon?
Should we get to the science?
Yes. Okay. So.
No.
I'm actually well excited for the science.
I-
Oh, delighted. Okay. Let's Okay, so this paper was published actually, I think, the Valentine's week, so it's quite recent.
You might have heard it in the news, actually.
Yeah, it got a lot of media coverage. They were covering it. It got headlines in on BBC, Daily Mail, The Guardian.
Good
Like-
old Daily Mail.
The good old
Sorry,
Daily
all my
Mail.
science from Daily Mail.
No, but that's a good point because, you know, some newspapers are a bit more dedicated to actually, you know, giving a well-rounded overview, whereas others just, you know, like to make headlines.
Yeah.
To be fair, there is a lot of science in Daily Mail, just most of it's shit.
Most of it's really shit and completely taken out of context.
Did they cover the thing about
Beware.
looking at your shit and the toilets? The toilet science.
No, so that hasn't been published. It was an innovation forum.
To be fair, it did sound amazing.
It
I
sounded
know.
innovative.
And you know what the thing
Also
is?
that.
When you actually think about it, we're not that far off things like that. Like, Japanese people have these amazing
I was
toilets.
literally going to say, there's toilets that wash my bum. I'm sure
Yes.
there's toilets that tell me how
And
good my poo is.
Not only do they wash your bum, you can pick what temperature they wash your bum at. And the water pressure.
How
Oh my
do you?
God.
But if you've never done it before, how do you know what's the right one?
Someone was telling me about, I think I might have had this on a YouTube video, a toilet with a vortex option, which literally gives you
Sucks
a
you
mini
into
enema.
A what?
A mini enema
Oh my
on
God,
the toilet.
That's not far off, this toilet that would
I don't know.
evaluate your poo.
So basically, the water shoots out so hard and fast, it goes up you
and
and
then-
like cleans you out.
Why would anyone want that?
People pay for enemas.
But
all
how
the
would
time.
you
Oh,
know?
You wouldn't-
actually,
you wouldn't want
where
that though,
the
it's bad
hole
for you.
is?
I was gonna say
It's bad for
all
your
this
microbiota.
This trend of people going for enemas and getting their intestines flushed out, is that actually genuinely good for you?
Mm-mm.
They're
It's not. It's been shown to decrease your... Okay, so I'm gonna paint a little picture here, just so, because I keep going on about the microbiota, so I just want to make it a bit more imaginable.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about all these little bacteria in your gut as like little kind of soldiers, that's what they are. And there's millions of them.
My little soldiers.
Yeah, they're your little soldiers, okay? They're your little army, and they have like diverse functions. They're really, really important. So you need to feed your army. You need to like, you know, take care of your army. You need to give them the right weapons.
Like let them rest and stuff.
Yes, let them rest. That's very important. You don't need to like. So what an enema does basically is like
kills your army.
drains your army
Question.
and floods it back out
Is
again.
it colonic irrigation or enema, or are they the same?
Yeah, so no, colonic irrigation is actually what we're talking about. Enema is like only your...
Is it just really clean it out?
An enema is like the last part of your large intestine. So just where your poo is stored, basically, it just
Right.
flushes that
That
out.
feels really far inside me.
It it feels that way, but it's actually not.
That is super interesting though. So you're drowning your little soldier intestine man.
Yeah, so that's what
When you
colonic
do that.
irrigation will do, because colonic irrigation shoots water the whole way around your large intestine.
What is
Why?
the purpose for doing this?
Because
Wait,
it was one of these, like, basically like a fad. So
it's like a Hollywood.
some
sort of-
celebrity came out and said, I get colonic irrigation, I feel so much better after it. It's detoxing. Least
Right,
favourite
yeah,
word
the
in the world. All this type of thing. And yeah, everybody was just like, oh well, Kim Kardashian's doing it, I'm
Is
going to
it
do
not
it.
even like a?
I don't know if
a
Kim
sort
did
of,
it, by the
like,
way.
Fat burning or weight loss
I was
thing.
going to say, I think a lot of people do it to lose weight.
I think that's where it came from.
Yeah.
Do you lose weight from it?
No, it's only momentarily because
Yeah.
you basically do a massive shit, don't you?
Yeah,
Right.
so it literally removes
So for
weight.
a day, you look great.
Pretty
It's
much.
like you
and you
know-
won't feel bloated anymore. But the reason you, like, there's complex things going on, but basically if you, like, fuck up your microbiota, especially if you, like, decrease their numbers, you're not gonna, they produce gas. So if you're getting rid of some of them, your little army, you're shooting them out, you're not having as much gas in your system, so you'll feel less bloated initially.
And then
But
you'll
then that's gonna
feel
have
super bloated.
detrimental effects.
It's like, did
For other
you
things.
see the episode of Super Size vs Super Skinny where the woman, I can't remember what her name is, she went for a massage once where they basically massage your stomach quite deeply, and she said that afterwards she went for the biggest poo she's ever done in her life, and her waist went down by 2 inches.
Holy.
Yeah.
And
cow.
is that good for you? Like, was that massage actually good for you? Like, is that...
So I've never heard of that before. But I mean, you know, you're not changing anything
Anything inside
compositionally.
you.
All you're doing is moving things along, so it can't really be bad for you. I
But
don't,
you can't get that
in my
every
opinion.
week, can you?
But I feel like that's definitely like probably expensive. Maybe.
I'm gonna protect my soldiers. That's
You
my
should,
plan.
you should.
Well, so apparently these abdominal massages for constipation are recommended by the hospital. They do it
Okay.
at Guy's in St Thomas.
Yeah.
Should we get to the paper?
Yeah.
Yes,
let's do
sorry,
that.
let's get to the paper. Okay, so as I was saying, this paper is published quite recently.
In Valentine's week, you said?
Yes, in Valentine's Week, yes.
I was
It
listening.
was
Good
on the
memory.
Daily Mail and the BBC.
Good memory. And
And
that's
the
how we
Guardian. See, we pay
Ooh,
attention.
listen.
A for effort, guys. A for effort. So, the title of this study, I'm going to read it out. It's the consumption of ultra-processed foods and cancer risk, semicolon, results from the NutriNet Santé prospective cohort.
The nutrient.
Courthouse?
What did you say?
Whorehouse.
Cohort.
What?
Okay, can I read that out again? Because I
Yeah.
don't know how to pronounce
I think I
cohort
prefer
there.
Nutrisante perspective whorehouse more than cohort.
Please
Why,
read us the
why we're
title.
here. Yeah, cool. Okay, so the paper is titled Consumption of Ultra-Processed Foods and Cancer Risk, semicolon, results from NutriNet Santé prospective cohort.
Nutri what?
Can you say
Okay.
that again in English, please?
Of course
Do you
I
want me
can.
to read it out?
No, I understand every word that she's said, but it means absolutely
It's just
nothing.
those last two. I'm
Curry's
struggling
slagging my accent.
No, not at all.
with.
But we don't know what any of what you just said means.
Of course, I will
Okay,
now
break it down.
explain.
Break it
I'll now
down.
Let's go
explain.
from the beginning.
So basically, they're saying that by eating ultra-processed foods, you increase your cancer risk.
What's an ultra-processed food?
Good question. So they basically went to this thing called the NOVA classification, which is a classification that's been developed by researchers in Brazil. It's a 4-group classification. The 4 groups are unprocessed or minimally processed. So that's like raw foods, like whole vegetables, whole grains, things that haven't been processed. And processed culinary ingredients, which is things like, I guess, butter.
So like basic stuff that you would have to process in order to be able
Yeah.
to eat it.
Yeah. And processed foods, which are so like they're things that will undergo a single industrial process. So like say something that's processed like a can of vegetables, but they add salt to it. So they're like
Right.
salted vegetables. But how they define it is their processed foods are things that maybe only one thing is added to. So they're kind of minimally processed. Then ultra processed foods. Okay, this is kind of where things get a bit interesting. So it's a very broad category. They define it as anything that's had like more than one industrial process done to it. I'll just explain it now and go on to the issues about it in a while. But the researchers who conducted this study themselves gave some examples, and their examples were, so for instance, fruit compote, okay? So just to give you a comparison between processed food and ultra processed food when we're talking about fruit compote. So a fruit compote that is just fruit and sugar, that would be processed. A compote that is fruit, sugar, a stabilizer, an emulsifier, other things that are
Like
going to
colourings and stuff.
preservatives, anything like that, that's termed ultra processed.
Right.
Okay?
So there's obviously a massive sort of spectrum of ultra processed things.
Yes. Very, very broad category. That is what I will say. This is one of actually what I would say is one of the major flaws of the study, and why I'm having such a difficult time maybe explaining it, because this whole classification, the NOVA classification, while they do like, you know, they have categories and they have rules for each category is extremely broad, and there's a lot of things you can classify into. So trying to kind of describe each category in terms of nutrition is quite difficult. They would all have a huge range of products in each category, varying in nutritional profile extremely.
So I guess where in the ultra process, like you'd have like a ready meal, but you'd also have like a soup that you can buy where you just microwave it.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
they're completely different kind of
completely.
Nutritional value could be astronomically different in
Uh-huh.
terms of something with loads of meat and loads of salt and loads of things that are traditionally bad for you, or the fruit pot where it's got a bit of sugar in it but actually isn't strictly terrible for you.
Exactly. So also, like, you guys have caught on to it really well. For instance, some things that were included in ultra processed would be like shop bought hummus.
And that's interesting because hummus is something that people buy thinking is really
It's healthy
for you.
And that's the thing. Who's to say it's not? This is how broad this category is, and kind of the ambiguity around it, and how, in terms of nutrition, it's not a very well-defined thing.
So this is a problem with your study.
Yes.
Then when you come along and someone's like, right, well, hummus can give you cancer.
Basically.
Also,
stop eating hummus. It's
So
time to go to
can-
Burger
Yeah,
King.
hummus is really
All
bad
the
for you.
vegans are fucked now.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, you know, like all these vegan snacks that are out there, a lot of them use. Now there are obviously some that use only whole ingredients and are like, you know, very
It costs
natural.
more to produce them, right? So
They do, yeah, they're expensive. But there's also things out there that need like preservatives in order to keep them. You know, shelf life, all that type of thing. So things that are thought of and actually are nutritionally quite healthy and balanced are going to be put in this ultra processed food
like
category.
a naked bar.
Naked bars are quite good though if you look at the ingredients.
I think naked bars
It's normally just like dates, raisins, dates, cashews, and something else.
and something. Yeah, no, I think
But, like,
I think
would they not be ultra processed because of how you've got to get it into that bar? And
yeah, you could say that because they're saying
they last for ages. Like you don't need to eat them within 2 days.
but they're still 1 in 5 a day.
I mean, a lot
Exactly.
of things are one of your 5 a day that probably shouldn't be eaten.
Like
But there
baked
was-
beans.
Or orange juice.
Damn.
You leave
Yeah.
my orange juice alone.
The question is, going to on my commute in the morning, just enjoyed a great glass of orange juice. Yeah, I've had one of my 5 a day, and then listen to this podcast. And they get to that point.
I'm sorry, please
I'm
continue.
sorry.
Just
Sorry
get
if we
fresh
ruined
orange
your day.
juice.
Or a smoothie.
Come on, let's-
If you make it yourself.
Controversial.
Yes.
You know, but it's only one
Period.
of your 5 a day is from a juice or a smoothie, right?
Yeah,
But I
And
mean,
then
the
the rest
5 a day
straight
thing is still controversial.
it
as
is
well.
also
Look,
controversial.
We've got to do our best, Corinne.
Yeah,
Isn't the 5 a day and basically isn't the 5 a day thing kind of way less than maybe you should have? But it's like the government are obviously like, well, we're not going to tell people to eat 10 different coloured, freaking super healthy like raw vegetables a day because they're just not going to do
There
it.
aren't even 10 vegetables.
It's like there you have it. Case in point. But yeah, like
disclaimer: there are many more than 10 vegetables. So back to the paper. So what this study did, now we have a good grasp on the ultra processed foods, that it's a very broad category and not necessarily all unhealthy is the major point that we need to
like, be aware of.
yes, be very aware of.
Yeah.
So this study then went and said, based on their observations, that ultra processed foods are associated with a 12% increased risk of cancer.
That's quite whopping.
Yeah.
12%.
12.5%.
12.5.
12.
Oh, I don't know where I got the 0.5 from.
Mate, you're
I
rounding
don't
it
know
up.
where you got the word whopping from.
It's not so whopping anymore, only at 12.
I mean, that 0.5 really pushed it over the edge, but we're back to 12 now, so that's acceptable.
Whopping, so I wouldn't say whopping purely because we've defined that there are loads of freaking foods.
But
Yes, Dan.
isn't it like kind of the point that nothing actually gives you cancer?
But everything also does.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And that's why
So
the Daily
then
Mail
what
covered
gives
this.
you cancer?
Hmm.
Yeah, so
So we need to
basically,
narrow it.
I'll tell you what they did and how they came to this conclusion.
Okay.
So it was a study done in France. It's a large prospective cohort study. So what that means is they recruit people. It was a really big study. So they got, like, in this paper, they've analysed data from 105,000 people.
That's good. I can rely on this data.
That's what you think.
Oh, no, don't do this to me.
Like, you know,
But
you
wait.
get those makeup studies, and on the advert, it's like surveyed 75 people.
Yeah.
That's no one.
You're like,
75
no.
people who work for the company.
Yeah.
And this is the thing, when these results are published in the media, everyone reads them and they're like, oh, 105,000 people. Like, that's some serious results.
You look at the top line,
But read between the
Dive
lines,
deeper.
dive deeper. So first of all, the study design, so prospective cohort, what they do is they recruit all these people, they measure things like their food intake. This study did it every 6 months, and they did it by an online questionnaire. So every 6 months, these people would go, they'd get an email saying, oh, you need to fill out your questionnaire. They'd fill out their food questionnaire. It was a 24-hour diet recall. So at the end of 24 hours, they sit down and like fill in everything that they've eaten for the last 24 hours.
That's already unreliable
Yeah,
because you're asking people
that's
to
mad.
report accurately what they just ate.
Like, you wouldn't want to tell someone you just ate a
People are
whole
ashamed
packet of
of what they
Pringles,
eat.
would you?
Such is the
Nature.
of nutrition research.
I think I read a study where they were talking about self-reported food diaries and self-reported food intake, and the error that they reported was something between 30 to 50%
Because people just didn't want to tell people.
Not tell, but one,
just
they
forget.
don't write as much detail as they need to. Like the method that you cook your food makes a huge difference in the nutrition of your food. Or they don't remember. Do they remember the show Secret Eaters?
I was just gonna say,
Yeah.
like those shows
Yeah.
where they're like, oh yeah, so I had packet crisps, salad, and then it's like you had 15 beers.
Yeah, it's like
You
that.
didn't report
Yeah.
any of
Exactly.
that.
Yeah.
We have you on camera. You wasted.
Secret Eaters was fucking great, by the way. They
It
should bring
was.
them. It's great.
So
Anyway.
but then in terms of nutrition research, the gold standard would be giving people their food, but then that doesn't replicate real life. The other
Right,
best
yeah.
method is weighed food diaries. So that's where they have to carry little scales around with them and weigh all their food and write it down.
You're
in
not
weight.
going to do that in a restaurant, are you? You've got
Yeah.
a nice meal and you're like,
Yeah.
hang on.
So as we actually had to do that in my course, like we
Right.
had to like experience, like do it just to see the difficulty with having this as an
Like, go to
experimental
Nando's
method.
and be like, right,
Yeah,
I'm just going to buy
yeah.
me half chicken and my corn and my spicy rice.
Exactly. Yeah. Basically, it's really difficult. And if you want to do a study on 105,000 people, you're not going to be giving them all scales and asking them to weigh.
Hell no.
Sorry.
So basically, yeah, when obviously it's ideal to go and give all these people scales and get them to weigh all their food, but that is not possible on studies of this scale. So it is just generally accepted, that's a limitation. They do, in this study, they did have a measure of misreporting because there's ways of kind of trying to control for it. And you can also, when you're doing your statistics, take a certain percentage of underreporting into account. And like, I'm not the expert on statistics, so I'm not going to pretend that I know exactly what I'm talking about here, but there's ways of offsetting it. So
Yeah.
generally, even when things are measured by this way, it's still taken.
I know you just said you're not an expert on statistics, but is that likely to be less accurate if you're doing it with 105,000 people compared to if you're doing it with 1,000? Using those kind of like 30% misreport their food by this much.
It just really depends on the data that you have.
But this is all calling into question this study for me. I'm not ready to accept it.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're thinking that way. It means that I'm hopefully explaining something correctly. So then they measured it by 24-hour recalls every 6 months, and then they separated basically all of the people into 4 groups based on the proportion of ultra-processed foods they had in their diet as measured by these 24-hour recalls. So they had like the first group would have had the lowest obviously proportion of ultra-processed food, and the 4th group had the highest. They also measured loads of other things. So when you're measuring cancer risk, and in any scientific study, it's really important to take measures in order to minimize the impact of confounders. So confounders are things that are they're basically outside variables that are affecting both the exposure. So in this case, the exposure is ultra-processed foods, and the outcome is cancer. So they're things that will affect both.
Right.
Things like smoking, weight, socioeconomic status, level of education has been found to be one of them. There's a lot of different confounding factors that can influence the results. So what that means is they will influence the results so that you think, okay, the consumption of ultra-processed foods is linked to an increased 12% cancer risk.
There are lots of other factors to consider that also have an impact on whether you may or may not develop cancer.
Exactly.
And even genetics. That's another thing where...
And that's a huge thing with cancer, because cancer has been found to be an interplay between genetic factors and environmental factors.
Yeah.
So, that's why a lot of smokers get cancer. but not all smokers get cancer,
Yeah.
because the smokers that get cancer have these genetic risk factors
Yeah.
that makes them extremely susceptible to cigarette smoke, and then they then develop cancer. So yeah, smoking is a really big one.
Can I ask a question that maybe you're coming to?
Mm-hmm.
How did they measure the cancer bit?
Oh, so yeah, no.
Yeah.
That's a really good
I
question.
hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah, so basically I said that they submitted, everything was online.
Yes.
So they got these emails every 6 months to fill out these nutrition questionnaires. They also filled out a range of other questionnaires to collect all this data about like lifestyle factors. They also were asked to report, I think they asked every 3 months. So they got an email every 3 months to ask them to report incidence of cancer. Now, this is a huge study. So this is only one paper that's been published from that study. So they were collecting, it's kind of similar to a few studies that have been done, like large cohort studies, where they look at your diet and then they assess a lot of health outcomes. So this paper just reports on cancer, but they were probably also looking at like cardiovascular disease risk and like all these other ones.
Yeah.
So they probably received an email every 3 months being like, can you tell us about your general state of health, and like, have you contracted any disease, or like, have you been diagnosed with cancer, etc. They also gained access to, I think, a like general medical database
Right.
that helped them to determine diagnoses of cancer that their participants didn't report. So it was quite comprehensive in that manner. And then they also had, like, obviously every country they publish mortality, deaths are published basically. So they were able to use that to evaluate incidence of death.
And if someone
from
hadn't
cancer.
replied to their emails for a while, they'd be like, oh.
Definitely dead.
Yeah, so they called them like 3 times in the space of a week, and if no one answered, there was a box and you just ticked dead.
Dead.
It's like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, if you don't
Extremely
turn up to work
ethical.
for 3 days,
Exactly.
he's probably dead.
Exactly. So that's how they measured cancer.
What Alice is saying is right in terms of, with this study, they can't pick and choose who they're following and what groups they're going to be in. But when they come to analyze it, they create models. So with these models, they are basically saying, can we look at this association but adjust it so we
Right.
take into account that there's this and this and this and this and this.
Right.
So these statistical models, not necessarily accurate to true life, but are trying to give a very good representation of the relationship between these two things, if these things
Because they
are
take
taken
into account if someone is a smoker and they smoke 10 a day, there is this percentage chance of them
Yeah.
getting cancer, and that will be incorporated into the model.
Yeah. But then say one thing they wouldn't have been able to adjust for is genetics.
Because they didn't measure that.
And also, there still lies the issue of the
Ultra processed.
ultra-processed foods. I'm in on the conspiracy, guys.
Yeah, go Dan.
But so you're saying this was reported by a number of
Questionnaires.
papers, publications, is what I'm looking for.
News
places.
outlets.
So
Media.
what was the general
I mean, the usual, like, ultra processed
is bad?
is a bit of a scary word.
Yeah. But the thing
Like,
is,
people read ultra processed and they're like, oh shit.
I also think the general public will look at ultra processed and think, okay, well, that's obviously only talking about like McDonald's.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, if the Daily Mail covered it, there would be a reason. It has to be a shock value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It has-
And in general, when these like newspapers and stuff reported it, they'd be like, oh, ultra processed foods include like packaged snack foods, cakes, confectionery. They would say like heavily processed fruit, which is kind of like jams and like things like really heavily processed jams. Compote,
But I think people
things like
generally
that,
view
but-
something like jam as very, very highly sugary.
Yeah, but they would also include like but it's not just about being sugary. They proposed at the end of the study, they proposed mechanisms by which they thought that the ultra processed foods were increasing the risk of cancer. One of them was the poor nutritional quality. But then the paper itself also after they did the first model, which we spoke about a minute ago, they did another model where they adjusted for like diet quality in general, and they found no association. So that meant that there was no influence of poor diet. So it was something else going on with the ultra processed foods. It wasn't their poor nutritional quality. Because as I said earlier on, it's not like these foods weren't all necessarily of really poor nutritional quality. So that kind of makes sense.
I think the problem with something like this as well is the average person, they don't know what you mean by good nutrition, right? Like, as in, it's going to be really difficult for someone who doesn't know to sit there and tell you what a good nutritional diet is. So when they see ultra processed, they're going to immediately jump to things like McDonald's, blah blah blah, whereas they could look at a jam and say, well, this is made of fruit, so obviously it's not included in this and it's kind of good for me.
Yeah, exactly.
But you could release your own brown bread that isn't good for you at all, and you kind of jump on that as a marketing thing.
Like Kingsmill 50-50.
Yeah.
Which was the tagline was all the good of brown bread, but in like a white sort of.
Yeah.
Oh, that's racist.
If they said all the good of this is some Get Out shit.
Have you seen that?
It's very good.
Is it?
It's really
I do
good.
really want to see it.
It's been out for a year.
I know.
The thing is, I think this is the big problem with nutrition science. Not as in the problem with the field, but the problem with nutrition is that it's so easily taken
Out
by
of
the
context.
media and sensationalized because it is something that everyone cares about.
Yeah, and it's exploded
Everyone
recently.
needs to do nutrition to some degree. Like everyone eats.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think
it's relatable to
it's
everyone.
innate in everyone
Yeah.
to want to try and at least be a little bit healthy in what they're eating, right? So something like this is so easy for people to take and say, oh, well, blah, blah, blah. Whereas things like my paper, it's, if they say, oh, we might be able to predict this, it's kind of like, no one cares.
Is the Daily
But
Mail
now-
going to report on you might be able to predict something for bipolar people? Like, that doesn't relate
Exactly.
to anyone.
Whereas, shit, don't eat
bad food
McDonald's.
is bad for you.
Exactly.
You will die.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's like a proven, or not proven, I don't like the word proven. It's a thing that when people, especially in terms of nutrition for the reasons that you just said, when people read something that is already in line with their beliefs, that they want to believe. So like, ultra processed, number one, sounds evil. Number two, as we were just discussing, everyone's going to assume it's McDonald's and like all these things that are bad for you. Then people are like, oh, this confirms what I already knew, so that must be the truth.
Yeah. What do you
It's
think-
called confirmation bias.
What do you think would be a better name than ultra processed foods to get the point across to people?
I don't think it's the term for the category. I think the problem
the
is that the
categories.
category is far too broad. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the fact that like, there could be a million foods, or like, let's say there could be 10, just to give it a number, different foods in that category that have nothing in common in terms of nutrition, in terms of the packaging that's used on them, in terms of the processes. They could have nothing in common, but yet they're all being lumped in to having this one effect, which is increasing cancer. So that's like quite poor in my opinion. But this is the thing. The study itself did say, this is an observational result. So observations are one thing. The next level, so the next, like, in the hierarchy of evidence, that's like considered a kind of a moderate quality research. Strongest quality research is a randomized control trial. We would get two groups of people, give one of them loads of ultra processed foods, give the other one just a regular diet, and then see what happened to them.
Yeah.
You could never do that.
You can't do
because
that.
You can't
This
Oh,
is a
because
give
then you're
something.
giving people cancer.
Yeah.
But you're seen to be giving people something that would harm them. There's no
Yeah.
benefit to them.
I mean,
Right.
there's a whole conversation behind that could
Yeah.
be had as well.
But I'd do it if I got to eat McDonald's all day every day.
Yeah, so take-home message is proceed with caution with this type of study.
The question I want to ask about this is there a way to ever do a study like this in a, can you ever get to a point where you can reliably test this stuff? Because there are so many pitfalls. There are the people self-reporting. There's the ethical considerations with putting people in a controlled environment. It seems like this is something you're only ever going to be able to come up with sort of maybe this is contributing to...
To be honest with you, that is pretty much the main problem in every single field of science.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think as scientists, people try their best to recapitulate as much as they can what is happening in real life. But as human society, blah, blah, it is so complex and it's really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you need to try and like control for everything, every single little factor, while also maintaining the person's general behavior, living situation, etc., to as close as possible to normal. Because otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah.
If you're changing their normal behavior or their normal general diet, it has to be one thing that's changing.
Yeah.
If everything's changing, your results are...
And also, I think
Void.
this is something that is quite when you see articles about the science, so what you've pointed out is a limitation, right? If you read any reputable, most papers, they will have a full section at the end where they talk about all the limitations of their research. Like, if you're a good reputable scientist, you will know that you have all these problems with your research, right? Whereas when you see it in the news or blah, 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 they won't report that. They won't say, they're not going to say, they found this, but they also said that actually you need to be careful with these results because this and this and this.
Because who would want to read it if it
because
was just...
limitations aren't sexy.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why.
Yeah.
Dan's like, nothing about this is sexy.
I think this is sexy, man.
It's so
I think
sexy.
this paper is sexy. I think it just needs...
Yeah.
I don't like it when you say words like sexy. It sounds like my dad saying that.
It needs fewer ethics. It needs to be more renegade.
Yeah. So I went to a course recently. I'm only at the start of my PhD, so we have to go to all these. Some of these courses are mandatory to go to in order to learn about like consent, ethical approval, all this type of thing. And one of them, basically, there's an ethical code, or there's a few different ethical codes that are now in, like, their regulations, and everybody has to adhere to them. But before this ethical code, people were just running amok with all this research.
Why did they bring the ethical code in?
Yeah, I know, yeah.
I hate it already.
You get, like, so many juicy examples. Like, oh my god, this is the number one distraction I get in my day is looking up really unethical studies.
Basically,
which is terrible.
Science rock stars is what you're thinking.
I don't know now if we want to be referring to these people as rock
maybe
stars.
science Hitlers.
Like drugs, science, and
Yeah, some of them are Hitlers.
I thought this sounded a lot more fun at first.
No,
It sounds like this is kind of
like
not nice.
Scandalous. So there's one study, right? He was doing research in sexually transmitted diseases, specifically gonorrhea. So he went to Guatemala.
Did he have gonorrhea?
Himself.
Yeah.
He didn't report that. Anyway, he goes
unconfirmed.
unconfirmed. He goes to Guatemala, and basically, one of the big things with research is everyone has to know that they're involved in research because they have to be able to give informed consent.
Yes.
They need to know what they're signing up for, what they have to do, that they're not under any pressure to do this research. La la la. So he goes and rounds up like a cohort of prostitutes.
And just starts like swabbing them and shit.
No, worse. Rounds up.
Swabbing prostitutes.
No, that's not what happened.
He's not swapping them, Natalie. That's not where this is going.
He rounds up a cohort of prostitutes, gives them all gonorrhea. Then he wanted like a kind of a closed population that he could like, you know, keep track of, because what he wanted to do basically was research the effects of untreated gonorrhea on the body. So anyway, gives all the prostitutes gonorrhea, sends them into a mental hospital to give all the patients in the mental hospital gonorrhea. So all the prostitutes go and have sex with the mental hospital patients.
Wild.
How has he done this?
Give them all gonorrhea.
This is before the code.
This is before the code.
This is in the 70s.
So how did he send them all to the mental hospital?
No, he that's what I thought. I think he was like, look, mental people, you can have prostitutes. What he did
He was like,
he would commit the prostitutes to the mental hospital.
The way you said it, that was what I thought happened.
That's what I thought.
I was like,
No.
how are you doing this, man?
Okay, sorry, my wording there wasn't ideal.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, so basically, brings the prostitutes to the mental hospital, says to the
Lads, let's have a party.
prostitutes, here you go, here's some clients. Probably paid the prostitutes to go and, you know, have a good time. And then everyone has gonorrhea. They were all in the study and none of them had any idea.
But, and what was the point of the study?
when
to
did it
see
go?
See what would
effects on the
happen
body
to
were.
untreated gonorrhea.
So what did happen?
Did he then get bored and go home?
No, I think he followed them. I think he followed them for like 5 years.
So what happened?
Probably awful things, but the person who was telling me about this didn't go into it.
I'm sure most of them died.
I can see why that is considered unethical.
Yes.
Let's just
Can
leave
you?
it there.
Good question about this study.
Okay,
I've been
one
trying to
minute.
ask for a while. But
Oh,
I couldn't
sorry.
get it in.
Sorry.
Are there other ways to categorise foods?
Oh yeah.
Or is this isn't the only way?
No.
So you could categorise them
Yeah.
a different way,
Yeah.
but this is just the way these men have decided
Yeah,
to do it.
and there's like
Obviously it was men.
Yeah.
there's validated ways as well. There's like ways that have been proven to be representative of what you're actually eating.
Right.
Whereas this is just kind of a classification that's been come up with. It is useful in maybe some terms, but it's just maybe a bit too broad.
So
to
why
be
didn't they use a better one?
shouting about? Because I think ultra processed foods is quite like a relatively new term. They're relatively new in terms of nutrition. Like probably only maybe, I don't know, roughly last 10 years, kind of maybe last 15, 20, 10, roughly
Sure.
that area, which is quite recent when you talk about this type of thing in terms of like having robust classification methods. So yeah, that's probably why.
Okay, so yeah. So did you guys learn something? Did you guys have fun?
I had fun.
You didn't learn anything?
I I mean, ask me tomorrow if I still remember this. Because I learned a lot about neurons. About ultra processed foods. I was going to call them unprocessed then, which would be the complete opposite. Yeah, I felt like I learned a lot.
I quite like the thought of a patch clamp, and also I enjoy pipettes.
Well, we use a lot of them in
I
science.
think pipettes are really fun.
Yeah, they're
So
good
Natalie
times.
definitely learned something.
Yeah. Would you come back?
On your podcast?
Yeah.
If we had to, yeah.
Is this binding?
So we how we get our guests is we go to their houses in the dark with a knife,
And we say you don't come to our podcast.
and
We're gonna be really
We will
upset.
give you ultra processed food for the next 10 years.
we will give you gonorrhea.
Hey man, this podcast has been a learning experience and a cautionary tale, and I respect that.
That's it. That's your line, your tagline.
Anything
Time
you
for
want to promote?
Viennetta.
Promote.
Yeah.
Yes, we do a podcast. It's called The Denalysis. Well, you can find it if you type that. There's nothing else really on the internet called that. So if you're interested in football,
If you like fantasy football or just football,
yeah, it's Fantasy Premier League that we deal in.
Any other social media?
You can find us collectively as the podcast at The Denalysis on Twitter. We just have Twitter at the moment.
Cool. And also you can find us on Twitter and Instagram as @layoutpodcast.
If you would like to email us, you can do that at layoutpodcast@gmail.com.
And of course you can find Silent Demel's great writing of this episode on the blog at www.layoutpodcast.wordpress.com.
Shout out to Alice, not me, for our amazing logo that we love.
Yeah, you can find her on Instagram at Alice and the Ink.
Maybe we'll get Alice to redo our logo.
Yeah.
hey Alice, hit us up.
Yeah.
No, we'll hit Alice up. We're not going to get her to
We'll hit you
us
up.
She's not going to listen to this.
Yeah, she is.
She better do. We just shouted her out. I fought for her.
Anyway,
She
thank
has
you
to
guys
listen.
for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
It's done.
I didn't know.
And then your little jingle.
Complete.
How do I pause it? I'm scared.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
So you had the like extremely eager beavers that were going and weighing their gin and tonics and things like that, and I was just like,
losers.
no, not about that life. I agree.
Young man.
With a swapper.
Now I've seen those adverts, and I was like, I want that yogurt there.
You grew up in
I grew up
Texas.
in Texas. Yeah. And I ate a lot of yogurts, Natalie. Yogurts. I ate a lot of yogurts.